Today's March the 25th, and yesterday, through my work at the Foley Institute, we were very pleased to host someone at Washington State University to come and talk about democracy. And that person was General James Mattis, former or a retired four-star general and former US Secretary of Defense under Trump, with whom he had a bit of a falling out. And we were very lucky to get him because it turns out with Ukraine, the war in Ukraine going on between Russia's invasion of Ukraine, plus just a year and a bit ago, the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, there seemed like no better time to talk about democracy, and he gave a really great talk in a packed auditorium. We had about 650 people live and hundreds more watching online, and it was great to meet him. I got to have a little selfie shaking hands, and then I went to dinner with him, and a really terrific person and very thoughtful, and a real pleasure to meet him and listen to what he had to say and have a chat with him as well. And interestingly, he's actually from Pullman. He was born in this little town 70-something years ago, then moved to Tri-Cities, which is where he is now. And so we were lucky to get him, and I'm pleased we did. But I did think, we should have something to mark that. And so I stuck on some music. You may be able to hear in the background. I stuck on the plants. I don't really have much in the way of military music, but I'm playing Mars, the Bringer of War at the moment, my favourite version of the planets, of Holst's The Planets. It's an interesting drink. It's called General's Orders, and it's called that because it was developed by a bartender called Derek Brown in DC, and it was part of the National Archives. They did a show and a book on the relationship of alcohol to America, and it was called Spirited Republic. And we know Prohibition. We know America's had a sometimes fraught relationship with alcohol. And what he chose for the cocktail, this cocktail he made, as I say, it's called General's Orders, was because when Washington was camped with his men in Valley Forge camp, he made an order, and so he was the general, made an order for the men to receive a gill of whiskey, a ration of whiskey. So that seems like a great idea. It reminds me, of course, of the good old days. I mean, there's always been an act where physicians could prescribe alcohol in the old days. I remember my grandmother being prescribed stout by her doctor. Terrific. I need some of that myself. Well, maybe not. Anyway, this drink is made, and he took as its inspiration the fact that George Washington was a big fan of this stuff called cherry bounce. And cherry bounce is essentially a way to make alcohol by soaking fruit in some form of alcohol for a while in the sunshine, letting it kind of ferment, and then you let it get alcoholic and more flavored with the stuff you put in it, and then bottle it and drink it. And apparently Washington's favorite tipple was a cherry bounce. So we're going to make a drink that has something a bit like that in it. It's obviously going to have some whiskey in it, and some rye whiskey, because that's what they had. But it turns out the primary alcohol ingredient in it is aged rum. And I have some of this delicious Captain Morgan's private stock. It's really a delicious rum. It's aged. And I'm going to put in 1 ounce of that into a cocktail shaker that's already filled with ice, of course. 1 ounce of that, half an ounce of rye. I'm using my Old Forester, it's 100 proof. A little bit on the stronger side. If you're out there fighting a war, you probably want something with a little more kick to it. So Old Forester rye, use any rye whiskey you want though, of course, that you happen to have in. Half an ounce of that. And then we need a half an ounce of sugar syrup to sweeten that up a bit. And actually, this is not the only sweet thing that goes in there. And normally I'd put in the sugar syrup last, or the citrus in last, because the citrus especially kind of washes out the last bits of whatever sticky stuff you had in there, like a liqueur or a sugar syrup. No, I'm not doing that this time. I'm going to finish with cherry brandy. I did not have time today to go and make myself a cherry bounce, because you leave it in soaking for about 40 days or something, and also it wasn't much sun until recently either. Anyway, we want a half an ounce of this. This will be the thing that gives it the relationship, along with the whiskey, to George Washington. You get half an ounce of that. And then the final couple of ingredients, 3/4 of an ounce of freshly squeezed lemon juice, and a dash of Angostura bitters, like so. Just gonna shake this puppy up. should do us about 10 seconds or so, because we're going to pour it into our highball glass, again already filled with ice. Isn't that great? Just strain this in there. And obviously this is going to be a sort of brown colored drink because of the cherry brandy and the Angostura. And that is a wonderful color. Look at that. Just fantastic. Anyway, let's see what we've got. That's very tasty, and maybe this would encourage me to go to war. No, it wouldn't encourage me to go to war. Let's hope the wars are all over soon. Cheers.